two Apache sisters were about to be sold, until a brave man changed their fate, white heavy check mark. The wind whispered gently through the tall grasses, carrying with it the scent of sage and the distant aroma of wildflowers that had survived the chill of the night. In the quiet village nestled between two rocky hills, life was calm, almost serene, as if time itself moved slower here. Birds chirped softly, children laughed in the distance, and the elders sat by their homes, speaking in hushed tones about the day ahead. Among the villagers were two sisters, Nea and Tajai, whose laughter and curiosity were like the sunlight warming the earth after a cold night. Nea, the elder of the two, was 12 years old. She had a quiet strength about her, a sense of responsibility that came naturally. Her dark eyes, wide and observant, seemed to take in every detail of the village and the world around her. She loved helping her mother gather water from the nearby stream, assisting her father in small chores, and caring for Tajai, who was just 10 years old. Tajai was lively, adventurous, and full of energy. She had a laugh that could make anyone smile, and her curiosity often led her to explore areas of the village that others avoided. Together, the sisters were inseparable, bound by love, shared memories, and the unspoken understanding of each other's thoughts and feelings. That morning, like many before, they ran barefoot along the dusty paths, collecting herbs for their mother and listening to the songs of the elders. The air was fresh, filled with the gentle promise of a new day. The sisters talked and giggled, their voices mingling with the sounds of the village. They felt safe here, in the heart of their community, surrounded by people who loved and protected them. But even in this peaceful world, danger sometimes lurked quietly, hidden in the shadows beyond the hills. Life in their village had always been simple but beautiful. The elders told stories by the fire, recounting the traditions and history of the Apache people. Nea and Tajai loved these stories. They dreamed of brave warriors, cunning hunters, and clever leaders who had faced impossible odds and succeeded. But even as they listened, the sisters knew that the world outside the village could be harsh, full of challenges they could hardly imagine. Still, they had each other, and that bond was stronger than any fear or worry. One evening, as the sky turned a deep orange and the stars began to peek out from the darkening sky, the sisters were playing near the edge of the village. They chased each other between the tall grasses, laughing and weaving around the stone homes. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the calm of the evening. A horse's hooves thundered in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. At first, the sisters thought it might be a visitor or a friendly traveler. But the feeling in the pit of their stomachs told them something was wrong. From the hills emerged a group of men on horseback, faces hidden under wide hats and scarves. Their eyes were hard and cold, and the way they rode with determination showed that they were not here to trade or to speak peacefully. The sisters froze, holding each other's hands tightly. Fear surged through them like a cold wind, and for the first time, they understood the danger that had always been whispered about but never seen so clearly. The raiders moved swiftly, cutting through the village with an alarming speed. Screams erupted as families realized what was happening. Adults tried to protect their children, but the attackers were skilled, knowing how to create panic and confusion. Nea and Tajai were pulled apart from their parents in the chaos. Their mother reached for them, tears streaming down her face, but a rough hand grabbed each girl and dragged them away. The sisters struggled, but it was no use. They were lifted onto the horses, the ground falling away beneath them, and the safety of their home disappeared in an instant. As the wagon carrying the captives began to move, the sisters held each other tightly. Nea tried to comfort Tajai, whispering promises that they would see their family again, that everything would be all right. Tajai clung to Nea, her small body trembling with fear. The landscape they had known all their lives faded into the distance, replaced by unfamiliar hills and valleys. Every mile they traveled felt like a mile from safety, from love, from everything they had ever known. The other captives were silent, their eyes wide with fear. Some were older children, others younger, all sharing the same fate. They didn't speak much. Words seemed too fragile, too weak to carry their pain. But the sisters noticed how some of them tried to console each other, offering small gestures of kindness amidst the terror. Naya realized that even in the darkest moments, humanity could shine in small, meaningful ways. As night fell, the wagon stopped for a brief moment. The sisters huddled together under a thin blanket, trying to stay warm. They could hear the men talking in low voices, planning where to take them next. Naya strained to catch any detail, hoping to understand their destination. But all she could hear were cryptic words and the harsh sound of orders being given. Tajai's hand found hers in the darkness, and for a moment the sisters drew strength from each other. They whispered stories from home, trying to remember the smell of the fire, the taste of the bread their mother baked, the soft voice of their father. These memories became their shield against despair. In the distance, a faint glimmer of moonlight reflected off the rocks, illuminating the path ahead. Naya looked at Tajai and saw determination in her sister's eyes, a silent promise that they would survive this, no matter how hard it became. That moment of silent understanding strengthened Naya's resolve. She realized that even though they were small and powerless in the eyes of their captors, their courage and unity could carry them further than fear ever could. Meanwhile, beyond the hills, a man named Elias was riding through the rugged terrain. A former frontiersman known for his courage and fairness, he had spent years protecting people from dangers like this. Word of the captives had reached him, and his heart had been stirred. He had always believed that no one should be forced into suffering, especially children. Elias had faced many dangers in his life, but the thought of these innocent girls being sold for profit ignited a determination within him that he could not ignore. Back in the wagon, the sisters began to talk quietly about their hopes and dreams. Tajai, despite her fear, whispered that she wanted to return home and help their village flourish again. Naya spoke of keeping their traditions alive, of teaching their own children about the stories and songs they loved. Their words were small sparks of hope, tiny lights in the darkness that refused to be extinguished. As the wagon continued on its journey, the night grew colder. Stars shone above them, silent witnesses to the suffering below. Naya and Tajai held each other tightly, drawing strength from their bond. They did not yet know who would help them, or if anyone would, but they understood that their courage, their love for each other, and their will to survive were their most powerful tools. Little did they know that someone was already on their trail, a brave man who would change the course of their fate, someone who would risk everything to restore hope to their frightened hearts. And as the wagon rumbled along the rough terrain, carrying the two sisters further from everything they had ever known, a quiet story of courage and resilience began to unfold, a story that would test the limits of fear, bravery, and the unbreakable bond between two sisters. Even in the darkest moments, Naya and Tajai did not give up hope. They clung to each other, whispered stories of home, and imagined a day when they would be free again. Their journey had begun, and though the path was uncertain and frightening, their spirits remained unbroken. And so, under the moonlit sky, the two Apache sisters faced the beginning of a terrifying ordeal, unaware that their lives were about to intersect with the courage of a man who would change everything. The wagon continued to move along the dusty trail, creaking and jolting over rocks and uneven ground. The sisters, Naya and Tajai, remained huddled together under the thin blanket, their small hands tightly clasped. Each bump in the road made them jump, and each shadow in the night seemed to hold invisible threats. The fear they felt was deep, but so was their determination to stay together. They whispered quietly to each other, their voices barely audible over the sound of horses' hooves and the wagon's wheels. Naya tried to keep Tajai calm. "Remember the river by our village," she whispered. "The water was so cold and the fish would always swim close to the edge. We used to catch them with our hands." Tajai smiled faintly, the memory bringing a small comfort to her heart. "And the fire at night," she added. "Grandmother would tell stories until we fell asleep. I can almost hear her voice." These tiny moments of remembrance gave them courage. They clung to their past as a shield against the frightening present. As the wagon rolled along, they noticed other children being held captive. Some were older than Naya, others younger than Tajai. Most of them sat in silence, faces pale and frightened. A few tried to whisper words of comfort, but the fear was too overwhelming for most to speak. One boy, no older than Naya, had tears running down his cheeks. His mother had been taken away earlier in the raid, and he clutched a small piece of cloth that smelled faintly of home. Naya looked at him and tried to offer a smile, even though her own heart was heavy. She wanted to tell him that everything would be all right, but she didn't know if that could ever be true. The sun began to rise slowly, painting the desert with shades of gold and orange. The sisters, though exhausted, were forced to sit upright as the wagon continued its journey. The men who had captured them were stern and cold, giving little attention to the children except to make sure they stayed in place. They spoke to each other in low, harsh tones, planning where to sell the captives and how to avoid attention from the authorities. Every word the sisters overheard filled them with fear, but it also gave them small clues about where they might be taken. Tajai's curiosity, which had always been a source of joy in their village, now served as a way to gather information. She leaned toward Naya and whispered, "Do you think they will take us far from here? Will we ever see our village again?" Naya shook her head, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she didn't want to admit how uncertain their future was. "We have to stay strong," she said softly. "We have to believe that someone will help us." Their bond was their greatest strength. Even in the darkest moments, they found courage in each other. As the day wore on, the wagon stopped briefly near a small grove of trees. The captors allowed the children to stretch their legs and drink from a shallow stream. Naya and Tajai cautiously approached the water, the cold liquid refreshing their tired bodies. For a few moments, the sisters felt almost normal, almost as if they were back in their village. They watched the reflection of the sun on the water and imagined themselves back home, running through the fields and laughing without fear. It was during this brief stop that Naya noticed something unusual in the distance. A lone figure on horseback was riding along a separate trail, keeping to the shadows of the hills. She squinted, trying to understand who it might be. The figure seemed calm, confident, and deliberate in his movements. Naya's heart skipped a beat. "Tajai," she whispered, pointing toward the figure. "Do you see him? Who could that be?" Tajai followed her gaze, her small eyes widening. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "But he looks different. He doesn't look like them." The sisters didn't know it yet, but the man they saw was Elias, a brave and skilled frontiersman who had heard about the raid. He had tracked the captors from the edges of the hills, careful to remain unseen. Elias had spent years protecting vulnerable people from dangers like these, and the news of children being sold had stirred him into action. He knew that approaching too quickly could endanger the children, so he observed from a distance, studying the captors' movements and planning the perfect moment to intervene. Back on the wagon, the sisters were placed back into their confined space. The journey continued, each mile feeling longer than the last. The captors were silent most of the time, occasionally shouting orders or exchanging harsh words. The children began to notice the patterns of their captors, the pauses, the way they argued over directions, and the moments when they seemed distracted. Naya and Tajai quietly shared observations with each other, trying to find any weakness that could one day help them escape. During the journey, the sisters met a few other children who tried to speak to them. One girl, slightly older than Nea, whispered stories of her home and family. She told them how she had been separated from her younger brother during the raid. The sisters listened with empathy, their hearts aching for the other children's pain. They realized that everyone in the wagon shared the same fear, but they also shared the same hope. The hope that someone, somewhere, would come to their aid. As the day turned into evening, the wagon entered a narrow canyon. The walls of rock rose high on both sides, casting long shadows over the weary travelers. The sisters clung to each other, feeling small and vulnerable. The sound of the horses' hooves echoed ominously against the stone walls. Every creak of the wagon made them flinch, and every whisper from the captors caused their hearts to race. They tried to keep their spirits high, whispering small stories of home and imagining the safety of their village. During this time, Elias continued to track the wagon. He rode quietly along the ridge, careful to avoid detection. He observed the captors' habits, noting how they became tired as the day passed and how their attention occasionally wavered. Elias knew that these small weaknesses could be the key to saving the children. He thought about the sisters, imagining their fear and exhaustion, and felt a surge of determination. He would not allow them to be sold, not on his watch. Night fell and the canyon became a shadowy labyrinth. The captors stopped for a brief rest, and the sisters huddled together under a thin blanket. Nea whispered to Tajai, reminding her that they must hold on to hope. "We are strong," she said. "We have each other and we will survive this." Tajai nodded, tears shining in her eyes but a small smile forming on her lips. The bond between them was unbreakable, and it gave them the courage to face the unknown. As the children slept, Elias watched from a distance. He began to formulate a plan, thinking about how to approach the captors without putting the girls in further danger. He knew it would not be easy, but he had faced challenges before. He understood that bravery was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. And so, under the cover of night, he prepared for the task ahead, determined to change the fate of the two Apache sisters. Throughout the night, the sisters dreamed of home. They dreamed of the warm fires, the laughter of their friends, and the gentle touch of their parents' hands. These dreams, though bittersweet, strengthened their resolve. Even in the darkness, they held on to hope, imagining a day when they could return to the life they loved. And though they did not know it yet, their dreams were not in vain. A brave man was watching over them, planning the moment that would bring them a chance at freedom. The journey continued, long and grueling, but the sisters' spirits remained alive. Each mile traveled brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to grow stronger and more resilient. Nea and Tajai clung to their memories, their love for each other, and the faint glimmer of hope that someone would save them. They were small and frightened, yet their courage began to shine like stars in the dark canyon night. By dawn, the wagon reached the edge of a sparse forest. The children were tired, hungry, and thirsty. Nea and Tajai leaned on each other, drawing comfort from the closeness they shared. They whispered plans to stay alert and observe the captors, hoping that one day, a chance to escape might present itself. Little did they know that chance was coming sooner than they imagined. For the first time in many hours, the sisters felt the stirrings of hope, not because their situation had changed, but because they sensed that someone brave and determined was moving to protect them. Somewhere beyond the hills, a man with courage and skill was preparing to intervene, and although the sisters did not yet know him, their lives were about to change forever. The morning sun rose over the rugged hills, spilling golden light across the dry, dusty landscape. The wagon carrying the captives continued its slow journey, the wooden wheels creaking with each bump along the uneven road. The children huddled together, exhausted from the long night and frightened by the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Among them, Nea and Tajai held onto each other tightly, their small hands clasped like a lifeline. They had been traveling for what felt like forever, their bodies weary but their spirits stubbornly holding on. Naya's mind was busy, not just with fear, but with careful observation. She had noticed subtle patterns among the captors. They argued in low voices about which route to take, occasionally glancing at the horizon as if worried about being watched. Tajai whispered to her sister, "Do you think someone will come for us?" Naya took a deep breath, trying to steady her own heart. "We must believe that they will," she said softly. "Even if we can't see them yet, hope can guide us." Their whispered words were like small flames in the dark, a quiet defiance against the fear that surrounded them. Far above, riding along a hidden ridge, Elias observed the wagon from a distance. His eyes were sharp, taking in every detail. The tired expressions of the children, the careless movements of the captors, the way the horses slowed as they climbed a particularly steep hill. He knew he had to act carefully. One wrong move could put the girls in greater danger. Elias had faced many dangerous situations before, but this one weighed heavily on his heart. These were children, innocent and vulnerable, and he could not allow them to be sold like property. Elias dismounted his horse and crouched behind a large boulder, studying the captors' behavior. He noticed that the guards were growing complacent, tired from the long journey and underestimating the courage of anyone who might follow them. He began to plan his approach, thinking of ways to intervene without causing a violent confrontation. His mind worked quickly, calculating distances, potential escape routes, and the risks involved. Courage was not enough. He needed strategy, precision, and timing. Back in the wagon, Naya and Tajai tried to keep their minds occupied. Tajai began humming a soft tune that their grandmother used to sing, a melody that reminded them of home. The sound was comforting, almost magical, weaving through the tense silence of the wagon. Other children began to listen, and a sense of quiet solidarity formed among the captives. For a moment, fear was replaced by memory, and memory was replaced by a fragile sense of hope. As the day wore on, the wagon stopped for a brief rest near a shallow creek. The captors dismounted to tend to their horses and eat, paying little attention to the children. Naya and Tajai used this moment to stretch their stiff limbs and observe the surroundings. They noticed the trees and rocks that might provide cover, the streams of water that could be used to wash and refresh, and the open areas where they could run if given a chance. Every observation, every small detail became part of their unspoken plan to survive. Meanwhile, Elias crept closer to the wagon, using the trees and rocky terrain as cover. He watched as the captors relaxed their attention, talking among themselves and laughing in cruel jest. This was his moment. He approached cautiously, moving silently, making sure the children could not see him yet. His heart beat steadily, not with fear but with determination. Every step brought him closer to the girls and to the opportunity to change their fate. As Elias drew nearer, he noticed one of the captors checking the children closely. The man's expression was harsh, his eyes scanning for any sign of rebellion or escape. Elias stayed low, understanding that he had to wait for the right moment to act. Timing was everything. If he acted too soon, the girls could be harmed. If he waited too long, they might be moved further away, lost to him forever. Patience, skill, and courage were his allies. Inside the wagon, Naya whispered to Tajai, trying to keep her sister calm. "We must be brave," she said. "No matter what happens, we will face it together." Tajai nodded, tears in her eyes but a small spark of determination shining through. The sisters' bond was a shield, stronger than fear, and it had sustained them through the long journey. They clung to each other, knowing that as long as they remained united, they could endure anything. Elias moved closer, taking careful note of the captors' habits. He realized that one of them always rode slightly ahead, leaving a small gap in their guard. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. Using the cover of trees and rocks, he positioned himself so that he could create a distraction and draw the attention of the captors away from the children. Every movement was deliberate, every breath controlled. The risk was high, but Elias knew that bravery was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. When the moment finally came, Elias acted. He threw a small stone to a distant part of the terrain, creating a loud clatter that echoed through the canyon. The captors looked up, startled, their attention momentarily diverted. Elias seized the opportunity, rushing toward the wagon with surprising speed. He shouted a command, forcing the captors to turn their focus toward him. Confusion spread among them as they tried to understand the sudden intrusion. Inside the wagon, Nea and Tajai were startled by the noise and the sudden movement. But when they saw Elias approaching, their fear was mixed with a strange sense of hope. He gestured for them to be quiet and to follow his instructions carefully. The sisters listened intently, understanding that their lives could depend on every word he spoke. Elias instructed them to stay low and prepare to move when he created the next distraction. The captors, now fully aware of Elias, tried to respond, but their surprise and confusion gave him the advantage. He used his knowledge of the terrain to maneuver strategically, keeping the children safe while distracting the men. His actions were swift, calculated, and courageous, each movement designed to protect the captives and create a chance for escape. The tension was intense, and every second felt like a lifetime. Nea and Tajai held their breath, their hearts pounding in unison. They followed Elias' signals, moving quietly and carefully. Each step brought them closer to freedom, but also carried the risk of discovery. They could see the fear in the captors' eyes as they realized their control was slipping. For the first time, the children sensed that their fate was not entirely in the hands of others. Courage and hope had arrived in the form of a brave man willing to risk everything for them. As the chaos continued, Elias managed to position the girls near a cluster of trees that offered cover. "Stay here," he whispered urgently. "Don't move until I give the signal." Nea and Tajai nodded, holding each other tightly. Their trust in Elias was complete, their hope now intertwined with his courage. They watched as he created another diversion, drawing the captors away just long enough to allow the girls a chance to escape. The plan worked. The captors, confused and alarmed, split their attention, trying to chase Elias and regain control. In that fleeting moment, Nea and Tajai ran, guided by Elias' instructions. Their small legs moved quickly, carrying them through the underbrush and toward the relative safety of the trees. Fear was still present, but it was now mixed with exhilaration, the thrill of survival, the joy of moving toward freedom. As they reached the edge of the forest, Elias met them, guiding them further into safety. The sisters clung to him, their hearts racing but filled with gratitude and relief. "You saved us," Tajai whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Elias smiled gently, his eyes filled with both seriousness and reassurance. "No, you saved yourselves," he said softly. "Courage is not just mine, it's yours too." For the first time in many days, Nea and Tajai felt a sense of hope that was more than just a fragile spark. They were alive, safe, and together. The journey was not yet over, but with Elias' help, they had taken the first step toward a new life. The bond between the sisters, strengthened by fear and struggle, was now reinforced by the bravery of a man who had risked everything to protect them. As night fell, the three of them moved further into the forest, finding shelter beneath the thick branches of a large oak tree. The girls were exhausted, but their spirits were lifted. They spoke in whispers, recounting the events of the day and marveling at how their lives had changed so quickly. Elias listened, offering guidance and reassurance, teaching them that even in the face of danger, courage and hope could light the way forward. For the first time since the raid, Nea and Tajai allowed themselves to rest without fear of immediate capture. Their journey was far from over, but they knew that with each step, they were moving closer to safety and a chance to rebuild their lives. And as the stars twinkled above, silent witnesses to their bravery, the sisters felt something they hadn't felt in days. The quiet but powerful certainty that they were not alone, and that someone believed in their right to freedom and life. The forest was quiet, save for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind, and the distant sound of birds settling for the night. Nea and Tajai clung to each other, their small hands intertwined, as they moved carefully under the guidance of Elias. Their legs were sore, their bodies tired from days of travel and fear, but their spirits had been lifted by the possibility of freedom. For the first time since the raid, the sisters felt a sense of purpose, a feeling that they could take control of their own destiny. Elias led them along narrow paths through the thick underbrush, avoiding the main roads where the captors might search. Every now and then he would pause, listening intently to the sounds around them. The girls learned quickly to follow his example, crouching low and moving silently. They were afraid, but their fear had transformed into determination. Each step brought them farther from the terror they had endured and closer to safety. As they moved deeper into the forest, Elias spoke in a calm, reassuring voice. "We must keep going," he said. "The longer we stay in one place, the greater the chance they will find us. But if we move carefully, we will stay ahead of them." Nea nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. She knew that the danger was not yet over, but the presence of Elias gave her hope. Tajai, though still trembling, matched her sister's steps, trusting both Nea and the brave man who had saved them. The forest was dense, and the path was difficult. Roots tangled underfoot, and rocks threatened to trip them at every step. The sisters stumbled several times, but Elias' steady hand helped them regain their balance. Each time, Nea whispered words of encouragement to Tajai. "We can do this. We are strong. We will not give up." Tajai nodded, finding courage in her sister's strength. The journey was grueling, but their bond kept them moving forward. Night deepened, and shadows stretched across the forest floor. Elias had chosen this time carefully. The cover of darkness made it harder for the captors to follow, but it also made the journey more dangerous. Every sound, a snapping twig, a rustling branch, even the distant howl of an animal caused the girls to tense. But Elias remained calm, guiding them with quiet confidence. "Listen to the forest," he whispered. "It will tell you what is safe and what is not. Trust your senses and trust each other." As they moved along, Nea thought of her parents, her village, and the life she had been torn away from. A pang of sadness hit her, but she pushed it aside. Now was not the time to dwell on what had been lost. Now was the time to focus on survival and hope. Tajai, too, thought of their grandmother's stories, drawing strength from the tales of brave ancestors who had faced impossible odds. These memories were like armor, protecting them from despair and giving them courage to continue. After hours of careful travel, the group came to a small clearing. Elias motioned for the girls to stop and crouch behind a thicket of bushes. "We need to rest for a moment," he said softly. "The captors may be searching, and we must be ready if they appear." Nea and Tajai sank to the ground, their bodies exhausted but their hearts still racing. Elias pulled out a small cloth from his pack, offering water to the sisters. They drank sparingly, knowing they had to conserve their strength. During the brief rest, the sisters whispered to each other about what had happened. "Do you think they will come after us?" Tajai asked, her voice barely audible. Nea shook her head. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we have to keep moving. We cannot let fear stop us now." Their whispered conversation reinforced their courage, and for a moment the forest seemed less frightening, as if hope itself had woven through the trees. Elias kept watch, scanning the horizon for any sign of the captors. He knew that the group could not stay in one place for long. If they were discovered, their safety would be compromised. He whispered instructions to the girls, teaching them how to move silently and how to hide quickly if needed. The sisters followed his directions carefully, learning the skills that might save their lives. Every movement was deliberate, every breath controlled, as they became more aware of the dangers surrounding them. The night wore on, and fatigue threatened to slow their progress. Elias encouraged them to keep going, assuring them that they were almost beyond immediate danger. The sisters' legs ached, their stomachs growled with hunger, and their throats were parched, but they pressed on. Every step forward was a small victory, a reminder that they were no longer helpless captives, but active participants in their own escape. As they moved through the forest, they encountered obstacles: fallen trees, streams to cross, and areas where the underbrush was thick and hard to navigate. Elias guided them carefully, showing them how to step over roots and rocks, how to balance on slippery logs, and how to use the shadows for cover. The sisters learned quickly, their confidence growing with each successfully navigated challenge. By now, they understood that survival required both courage and skill. During one particularly tense moment, a distant shout echoed through the trees. The captors had discovered the girls were missing and were searching for them. Nea and Tajai froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. Elias quickly pulled them into a dense thicket, pressing them down as he whispered instructions. "Stay still and quiet," he said. "They will pass if we are careful." The girls obeyed, holding their breath as the sound of searching voices drew nearer. Moments later, the shouts faded, and Elias allowed them to continue. The sisters had learned an important lesson. Survival required patience, silence, and trust in their guide. The forest slowly began to change as dawn approached. The trees thinned, and the first light of morning filtered through the branches. Elias led the group toward higher ground, where they could better see their surroundings and plan their next move. The sisters felt a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. They were still in danger, but each passing hour brought them closer to freedom. As they climbed a ridge, they paused to look back at the forest they had left behind. The trees stretched endlessly, hiding dangers and secrets within their shadows. But the sisters no longer felt the same fear they had at the beginning of their journey. They had faced danger, endured hardship, and relied on courage and trust to survive. Each step forward was a testament to their resilience, and each glance at the horizon reminded them that freedom was within reach. Elias stopped at the top of the ridge and pointed to a distant valley. "We need to move carefully through there," he said. "It will take time, but it is safer than staying on the open paths." Nea and Tajai nodded, ready to follow. Their legs were sore, their bodies weary, but their spirits were stronger than ever. They had faced fear and uncertainty and had come through it together. The sisters' bond, strengthened by adversity, was now unbreakable. As they descended into the valley, they encountered a small stream. Elias encouraged the girls to drink and wash their faces. The cool water refreshed them, washing away some of the grime and fatigue from their long journey. Nea and Tajai felt renewed energy, their hope growing with every passing moment. They began to imagine what their new life might look like, dreaming of safety, family, and the warmth of a home once more. Despite the small moments of relief, the journey was far from over. Elias reminded them that caution was still necessary. The captors were still searching, and they could not afford to be careless. The sisters listened intently, understanding that their survival depended on vigilance and trust. Every shadow, every sound was a potential danger, and they had to remain alert. As the sun rose higher in the sky, the group found a hidden clearing where they could rest more comfortably. Elias allowed the sisters to eat a small meal he had prepared, sharing dried fruits and bread. The simple food tasted wonderful after days of hardship. As they ate, Elias spoke to them about what lay ahead, reassuring them that safety was near, but that they would need to continue moving carefully. Nea and Tajai listened, absorbing every word. They felt a growing sense of confidence, a feeling that they were no longer just passive victims but active participants in their own journey to freedom. Each instruction from Elias, each obstacle they overcame, strengthened their courage and determination. The sisters knew that their survival depended not only on the bravery of their guide, but also on their own courage, resilience, and intelligence. By mid-afternoon, the group continued their journey through the valley. The terrain was rugged but manageable, and the sisters' spirits remained high. They moved quietly, alert to every sound and careful not to draw attention. Elias guided them skillfully, using his knowledge of the land to avoid potential dangers and lead the girls toward a safer future. As the day drew to a close, they reached the edge of a small forested area, which offered both shelter and cover. Elias encouraged the sisters to rest, assuring them that they had made significant progress. Nea and Tajai sank to the ground, exhausted but filled with a sense of accomplishment. They had faced unimaginable fear, endured hardship, and survived. Each step had been a victory, each moment of courage a triumph. As night fell once again, the sisters lay close to each other, feeling the warmth of their shared bond. Elias kept watch, alert and vigilant, ensuring their safety. The girls reflected on the journey so far, the fear, the hope, and the bravery that had guided them through the darkest hours. They knew that freedom was still ahead, but for the first time, it felt attainable, real, and within reach. The first rays of morning sunlight broke over the hills, illuminating the small clearing where Nea, Tajai, and Elias had spent the night. The sisters stirred from their sleep, stretching their tired limbs and blinking against the soft glow of dawn. For the first time in days, they felt a small sense of peace. The air was fresh and crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and pine. The forest around them seemed alive with quiet energy, almost as if it recognized their courage and determination. Elias gently shook the sisters awake. "It's time to move," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The safer place I spoke of is not far from here. We must continue, but the hardest part of the journey is behind us." Nea and Tajai rose slowly, still weary from the long escape, but a glimmer of hope shone in their eyes. They trusted Elias completely. His courage, guidance, and steady presence had kept them safe through every danger, and now they believed that freedom was truly within reach. The journey to safety was not easy. The terrain was rugged, with uneven ground, streams to cross, and dense patches of forest. The sisters' legs were sore, their stomachs empty, but their determination kept them moving. Every step they took was a step toward a life they had almost lost, a life filled with hope and possibility. They clung to each other, sharing whispered encouragements and memories of home to strengthen their spirits. As they moved, Elias spoke softly, sharing stories of the settlement ahead. He described a place where people welcomed travelers, cared for the vulnerable, and valued freedom above all else. He told the sisters that there were families there who would help them learn, grow, and heal from the trauma they had endured. These words were like sunlight breaking through clouds. The sisters listened intently, imagining the warmth, safety, and love that awaited them. The morning passed slowly, but gradually the trees began to thin, and the landscape opened up. Rolling hills stretched into the distance, and the sisters could see small patches of cultivated land that marked the presence of a settlement. Their hearts lifted at the sight. For the first time since the raid, they could imagine a life beyond fear, a life filled with friends, learning, and the chance to embrace their culture and traditions without threat. As they approached the edge of the settlement, Elias signaled for the sisters to remain quiet. He wanted their arrival to be safe and orderly. The girls followed his instructions, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. The settlement was bustling with activity, people moving about, children playing, and elders working diligently to care for their homes and the land. Yet, despite the activity, the place radiated a sense of calm, safety, and community that the sisters had not felt in weeks. Elias guided them to the entrance of the settlement, where they were met by a group of people who had been informed of their arrival. The villagers' expressions were warm, welcoming, and full of concern. They had heard of the brave man who had rescued the children and were eager to provide shelter, food, and care. Naya and Tajai felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. After days of fear, danger, and uncertainty, they had finally reached a place where they could feel safe. The sisters were led to a small, cozy home on the edge of the settlement. A kind woman greeted them, offering fresh water and a simple meal. The warmth of the hearth, the scent of bread baking, and the gentle kindness of the villagers enveloped them like a protective blanket. Naya and Tajai ate slowly, savoring each bite and realizing how long it had been since they had felt truly nourished and cared for. Their bodies were tired, but their spirits were beginning to heal. After the meal, the sisters were given comfortable bedding and a chance to rest. They lay side by side, holding each other's hands, and finally allowed themselves to release the tension that had gripped their bodies for so long. Tears fell freely, but they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than fear. They whispered words of thanks to each other and to Elias, who had risked everything to ensure their safety. Elias stayed with them for a time, watching over the girls and speaking gently. "You are safe now," he said. "No one can harm you here. This is your chance to grow, learn, and live freely. Remember that courage and love brought you here, and they will guide you always." Naya and Tajai listened, feeling a deep sense of connection and appreciation. Elias' words resonated in their hearts, affirming that bravery and hope were not abstract concepts, but real forces that could change lives. In the days that followed, the sisters began to adjust to their new surroundings. They met other children who had faced hardships of their own, forming bonds of friendship and understanding. They learned the daily rhythms of the settlement, gathering food, helping with chores, listening to stories, and participating in communal activities. Each day brought a mixture of work, learning, and laughter, slowly rebuilding the sisters' sense of normalcy and belonging. Naya discovered a love for learning, spending hours listening to elders who shared knowledge of the land, history, and traditions. She found comfort and purpose in understanding her culture, realizing that the stories and lessons of her ancestors could guide her in her new life. Tajai, meanwhile, embraced the freedom to explore, play, and create. Her energy and curiosity were no longer stifled by fear, and she discovered joy in the simple pleasures of her new home, the sound of laughter, the warmth of friends, and the beauty of the natural world surrounding the settlement. The sisters' bond, already unbreakable, grew even stronger. They supported each other through moments of homesickness and fear, celebrated each small victory, and shared dreams of a future filled with possibility. The lessons they had learned during their journey, the importance of courage, resilience, and trust, became a guiding light in their lives. They realized that even in the darkest times, hope could endure, and that the love between them could overcome any obstacle. Elias remained a quiet but constant presence in their lives for some time. He visited often, checking on the sisters and offering guidance when needed. He became a mentor, teaching them not only about survival and bravery, but also about kindness, fairness, and the importance of helping others. His example inspired the girls to believe that even small acts of courage and compassion could make a profound difference in the world. As weeks turned into months, the sisters' new life flourished. They were safe, happy, and free to be themselves. They learned new skills, made friends, and even began to share their own stories with others, inspiring courage and hope in those around them. Naya and Tajai understood that their journey, though painful, had shaped them into strong, compassionate young women who could face the world with confidence. One afternoon, as they walked through the settlement, Naya turned to Tajai and said, "We were lucky to find Elias. But we were also lucky to have each other." Tajai smiled, nodding. "Yes," she replied, "no matter what happens, we will always be together. We are stronger than we ever knew." The sisters embraced, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had endured and the life they now had the chance to build. The settlement became more than just a safe place. It became a home. The sisters were embraced by the community, welcomed into families, and given the chance to grow and thrive. Their days were filled with learning, laughter, and meaningful work. They no longer lived in fear, but in hope, love, and the freedom to shape their own destinies. In the evenings, Nea and Tajai would often sit together by the fire, reflecting on their journey. They remembered the fear of being taken from their home, the long days of travel, the dangers they had faced, and the courage that had guided them. They thought of Elias, whose bravery had changed the course of their lives. And as they watched the flames dance and listened to the gentle crackling of the firewood, they felt a deep sense of peace. Their story became a quiet legend within the settlement, a tale of courage, resilience, and hope. Nea and Tajai grew into young women who carried the lessons of their past with pride and strength. They understood that life could be harsh, but also that bravery, love, and trust could overcome even the greatest challenges. They honored the memory of their parents and village, keeping their traditions alive while embracing the opportunities of their new life. Years later, when the sisters looked back on their journey, they saw it not just as a story of danger and fear, but as a testament to the power of hope and the human spirit. They remembered the terror of being captured, the uncertainty of the journey, and the overwhelming relief of finding safety. And they remembered Elias, the brave man whose courage had changed their lives forever. Nea and Tajai's lives were no longer defined by the raid that had torn them from their home, but by the freedom, love, and opportunities they had found in their new community. They thrived, inspired others, and carried forward the lessons of bravery, resilience, and the unbreakable bond of sisterhood. Their journey, once filled with fear and uncertainty, had transformed into a life filled with hope, purpose, and the promise of a brighter future. As the sun set over the settlement, casting a warm golden glow across the land, the sisters stood side by side, looking out over the fields and hills. The world that had once seemed so frightening now felt full of possibility. They smiled at each other, knowing that they had survived, endured, and thrived. And in that moment, Nea and Tajai understood a truth that would guide them for the rest of their lives. Courage, hope, and love could overcome even the darkest of times.